Hi, welcome to Colorado Business Roundtable's virtual roundtable on smart regulation. At Colorado Business Roundtable, we unapologetically tell the story that business is good. When business succeeds, Colorado succeeds and people succeed, and there's an interconnectivity to all of our success. And we're glad today to talk a little bit about the business community and how regulation shapes our economic future going forward. So welcome. I've got several special guests with us today that I want to introduce, and then we'll jump right into the questions. First, I'd like to introduce Cinnamon Watson. She is a principal with Catalyst Public Affairs and has worked on many public issues that she can tell you about, everything from healthcare to oil and gas to education, and has a wide range of experience in public policy and campaigns as well. So welcome, Cinnamon.
Thank you.
Next, I want to welcome Senator Paul Lundeen. He is the minority whip for the state of Colorado and has a lot of experience. His resume is very broad in the business sector before he joined public office. His first run for office was for, I believe, the State Board of Education, and now he serves in the Colorado Senate. So welcome, Senator Lundeen.
Good morning, Deb and others. Good to be with you.
Thank you. And last, a big welcome to Lynn Granger, who's joining us today. Lynn is the director of API Colorado, and the Colorado Petroleum Council. And Lynn serves very ably in that role to help Coloradans understand the importance that the oil and natural gas sector has for all of us in Colorado, not only for the employees that actually work within that sector. So welcome, Lynn.
Thanks for having me.
You bet. And Lynn, tell me, before I know that, are you in the middle of a name change? API Colorado, Colorado Petroleum Council, help me get that correct for everybody.
We are. There's just too many acronyms out there, so we're just simplifying a bit and just going with API Colorado. So we're excited about the change.
Perfect. Good to have that clarified, and I apologize for that slip that I just clarified that. So before we jump into regulation, I think it's so interesting to think about how much our world has changed. And all of you spend probably most of your days thinking about regulatory environments for your specific industry in the case of Lynn, or for multiple industries in the case of Senator Lundeen and Cinnamon. What was top of mind for you thinking back January 1st? Because then we'll shift to like today, but I'm just curious, going back, what were the biggest issues that you faced? And Senator Lundeen, let's start with you.
Yeah, fair enough. I appreciate the question. For me, January 1st, we were girding our loins for yet one more round of the ongoing struggle between the power of the collective and the beauty of government's ability to help us all figure out how to be smarter with our lives and our businesses and the treatment of our employees. And I, of course, was among the minority caucus, the Republican caucus on the other side of that, saying, you know what? Freedom, giving businesses the opportunity to treat their customers with the respect that they need to treat their customers if they want them to come back. The freedom to treat their employees as team members, as family members, which they need to treat them like in order to keep them motivated so they can serve their customers well, so they can all prosper. We were preparing for that great unending struggle and battle. And then we marched a month or two down the road, and as Debbie, I think you're going to take us, things have changed with COVID. The silver lining in this incredibly dark cloud is we're all seeing that, yeah, maybe some of those regulations were maybe onerous. Maybe we should relieve some of the regulatory burden in order to help people get through this crisis. And my question would be, well, perhaps maybe we should just leave that regulatory burden on the side. We should leave it away and not return to it, because we're discovering, quite frankly, that in freedom, in the absence of regulation, good things do happen. And quite frankly, the good things are going to pull society out of the crack in which we've fallen with this virus.
Well said, Senator. Just a quick follow-up on that. How was your freedom argument working out? You know, in the minority, you know, that's not as much fun as being in the majority, but how was that going again back in January? And do you think that that'll be, I think you sound optimistic that could be something that resonates more going forward.
Yeah, I'm a 30-year entrepreneur, so I'm always an optimist. So optimistic. I'm in politics, and I stay in politics because I'm optimistic. The reality is, it was working out marginally. I think the challenge is it's a bit of a Sisyphean task. You know, Sisyphus rolling the monstrous rock up the hill that you can never get to the top of the hill with. It continues. For instance, I was on a call recently with the governor's office. They were rolling out their vision of what it will look like to return business to normal. And it sounded to me like six PowerPoint slides, very dense with information about how the government is going to regulate what businesses may and may not do. So we've still got a lot of attitude shifting that we need to continue to work for. And of course, my point on that call to the governor's office was, hey, I get it. You're the executive. You have responsibility for the safety of the people of Colorado, but businesses are so disparate. Businesses are so different. There are so many unique circumstances. You've got to give each business the opportunity to know what the goals are. Public health, public safety, we all understand that, but give them the ability to figure out how to do it. So the point there is, I think the governor's office, as of today, April 16th or April 17th now, is still thinking, hey, we're from the government, we're here to help you, and here are the regulations we think you should follow. So I think we are going to have to do some work to help them understand they've got blind spots, and they need to listen to the vision and the ability that businesses have to see perhaps more clearly how they can serve the people of Colorado better maybe than government can serve the people of Colorado.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, perfect. Cinnamon, would love to loop you into some of that. What were the policy issues that you felt were top of mind, you know, whether at the legislature or the ballot box?
Sure.
That were top of mind for you in January, and then how do you see it shifting for you?
Well, I think the one issue that really sort of captures where we were and where we are is, if you look back at January, we had a robust economy, low unemployment, everything was booming. And really what happens then, people start talking about growth measures, potentially limiting growth, traffic congestion, those kinds of things. And here we sit today with record unemployment, immediately looking at nobody on the roads. We're all staying at home. Transportation, nobody's talking about that. Nobody's talking about anything other than perhaps infrastructure as a means to get people back to work. So things have changed dramatically. I think back to January, and a lot of the policies specifically that we were considering as a state, everything from family leave, a public option for healthcare, have really been sort of turned upside down. When we look at what our hospital industry, what our doctors and nurses have gone through in the last 2 months, it's really breathtaking, mind-boggling, and I think really causes us to look at our healthcare workers and our hospitals and give them some applause, some accolades, and some thank yous rather than looking at increasing regulations.
Mm-hmm. That's a great point. They really are. There's so many heroes right now.
Absolutely.
You know, and I think we have to think through, you know, before we even talk about the economy, sort of take a deep breath and understand the safety risks that are involved, the health pandemic, and understand, you know, that there are folks, like you mentioned, Cinnamon, that are putting their lives at risk with this unknown, in so many ways, virus to this day. And so knowing that we're in just such unprecedented and unpredictable times, and the economy is one factor on that, but understanding the health risks is important for us to take a deep breath on that.
I think it's really unprecedented too, you know, in times like this, when we've been staring down a recession or even worse, we talk about the uncertainty in an economy, but I think Americans, Coloradans certainly have not just an uncertainty in looking towards the economy, but also just in general, our way of life. I mean, things have shifted so much. I know a lot of us were looking forward to Rocky's opening day, for instance. And certainly we'd love to get back to those everyday normal activities, but I think we're a little ways away. And so really being thoughtful about how we look down that road to economic recovery is going to be vital to not just our economy, but to our way of life.
Yeah, well, we can enjoy the less congestion on the streets. It certainly comes at a big cost.
No question.
So Lynn Granger, you are new to your position to some degree. I'd love to hear more about that and some of the challenges, again, that face the oil and natural gas sector in a normal year are already so, just so challenging, what you have to deal with, not only in terms of local, regional, and state regulations, but also some of the, of course, international implications that now face the oil and natural gas sector in terms of pricing. Tell us what's a day look like for you, Lynn, and how are you looking at kind of this regulatory lens?
Sure. So, gosh, when you ask the question, what did you think on, January 1st, 2020 and looking at the year? That seems so long ago right now, and it's only mid-April. We were already looking at a very intense and robust regulatory agenda for our industry going into 2020, coming out of Senate Bill 181 last year. Both at the Colorado Oil and Gas Conservation Commission and the Air Quality Control Commission. I mean, we were looking at rulemakings almost every month of 2020, a mega rulemaking in May that's now been likely postponed a couple months, but that coupled with, what's going on globally before coronavirus impacted everyone. The Russia-Saudi price war had, drastic effects on our industry. And of course, with the demand just in 50% in mid-March, it was cut by 50%, 50. All of those coupled together, I tell my members, unfortunately, it's a perfect storm. And the industry is in a really tough position right now. But I will tell you that if I had to choose any industry to be part of, it would definitely be this one. They're very resilient. This is a boom and bust industry. Obviously, these circumstances are unlike anything anybody's ever seen before, to include natural gas and oil. But we will rebound. We are part of the solution. I think right now we're just really focused on, being deemed a critical infrastructure, and our workers making sure that we're still providing the energy that everyone needs. While still, a lot of our workers are working from home if they can. So we're definitely just focused on trying to do our part right now. And as we look at the next few months, we are hoping from a regulatory standpoint, really that do no harm concept. Everybody is very focused on what we can be doing to, focus on health and safety and get our economy going again. When the time is right, and we really need to be focused on those things. And from a regulatory standpoint, we're really hoping that our regulatory bodies here in Colorado take a look at that and do no harm here in the foreseeable future.
Well, and like you said, Lynn, even what you've dealt with since January, as you're already going into a tough year, seems really challenging. One question, I'll stick with you, Lynn. The title of this particular virtual roundtable is called Smart Regulation. And I think it's interesting as one of our policy priorities with Colorado Business Roundtable, but the word smart really, it depends on who defines what's smart. Mm-hmm. And I'd be curious, especially thinking about the oil and natural gas industry, which in full disclosure is an industry I feel a lot of affinity for and a lot of friendship for, but it is regulated. And I think what's interesting for a lot of Coloradans, they don't understand to what extent there are already very good regulations put in place for the industry. So when you think about what's smart, what would you think about that, Lynn, in terms of what's the right balance of regulation to keep workers safe, to keep Coloradans safe, but yet still provide the resources that we need to have our quality of life?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think in terms specifically for Colorado, already, prior to Senate Bill 181, we have the strictest regulations in the nation, and I would argue in the world, for our industry. And we even prior to 181, always willing to come to the table, always room for improvement. Our industry is constantly innovating. The technology advancements are really incredible. So we're always looking for ways to continue to improve, our operations in light of public health, safety, and environment. And I think we'll continue to do that. But what I've been seeing and what's very concerning, specifically in Colorado, is just when you talk about smart regulations, in my mind, those are regulations that are put into place based on sound science, data, and facts. And what I'm seeing is this need to do as much as they can, as fast as they can, without really having the data and the science and the facts to back up the need for the regulations that they're trying to put into place, whether that's, emissions reductions, mitigating those environmental impacts. Again, we are very focused on that, but I'm just seeing that, overburdensome regulations, very costly regulations for our industry are being put into place and not necessarily achieving that desired end state or that goal that regulators are hoping to achieve. And so in my mind, that is smart regulation, when we're doing things that are based on fact, data, and science.
Mm-hmm. I really like that. I think, I know you and I have both been on site tours with elected leaders, and that seems like it helps so much because you're able to explain the process, all the different processes involved in extraction to them, and let them talk to the engineers and scientists, on the ground. Do you feel like that's been helpful as you talk to policymakers when they actually can come out and see for themselves what it's all about?
Absolutely. I think there's a lot of big eyes when we get folks out, right? That go, wow, I had no idea. I had no idea how sophisticated this operation was. I had no idea, all of this technology. This is great. And when we show, different, initiatives that industry is taking to, again, reduce emissions and, tankless systems, systems that are run off of solar power, which is, very mind blowing for a lot of folks. Absolutely. I wish, I say it all the time, I wish we could individually get everybody in Colorado out to see our operations and have that one-on-one time to really explain things. I think would be amazing. Unfortunately, that's not in the realm of possibility, but I really wish it were.
Yeah. And I think it's fun too. I know our mutual friend, Jan Coleman, who's an engineer, oil and gas engineer, is now a mayor of one of the larger cities in Colorado. And she talks a lot about bringing facts and science and sort of balanced thinking to the process in Thornton. So we're glad to have her as part of the elected body as well.
Absolutely.
Senator Lundeen, I'd love to throw you into the mix here because smart regulation. What's smart? You gave some really interesting sort of principles, I think, at the very beginning of the conversation around freedom. But how would you define smart regulation in your line of work?
Absolutely. There's any number of different ways of approaching it. One way we're seeing come to the forefront right now and trying to determine how to be smart comes back to a comment that Justice Brandeis made, Justice of the United States Supreme Court. He described the states as 50 experiments in democracy. Now, he was talking about the law, but that can also apply to regulation. I think there are 50 experiments in regulation. You can identify it as you look across the 50 states, who's doing it well, what's the light touch that's getting a positive result, and maybe apply those in other states and populate things out. Another thing that we're discovering as we go through this coronavirus, this COVID-19 crisis, is we as a nation turn on the TV and we watch what's going on in other states now. The conversation among the states is being given a certain attention that maybe it wasn't given. Each state is saying, well, we're having this sort of an experience. And yesterday, the White House said, as we open America back up, we're going to do it in a way that acknowledges the case-by-case, on-the-ground scenario in the 50 states. We're going to give the governors authority to do different things. I think that is a good way as a nation to be smart in our regulation, but we have to be smart enough to actually look out to see what's going on in the other states and seek the best practices. Now, from my perspective, that's not seek the most onerous practices. As Lynn properly said, Colorado has incredibly heavy burdens on oil and gas here in Colorado. That doesn't mean they're the best in the nation. They may be the most oppressive in the nation. They may be the most restrictive in the nation, but that doesn't mean they're the best in the nation. We need to be cautious that as we think about applying regulatory apparatus in place based on what we're seeing in other states, that it be the smart regulations, the place where you're actually getting a return on effort, a regulation that in fact does. If we're seeking clean water, it gets us clean water, but it doesn't shut off the spigot so we have no water. Those are the sorts of things that we need to be thinking about. So I think we're in a situation where our attention as a nation has been refocused. It's focused across 50 different states, and understanding what's going on in those states gives us the opportunity to seek out and find smart regulations.
Mm-hmm. And Cinnamon, I'm going to twist it up just a little bit for you, thinking about, policymakers. I know you've also got your eye on the state capitol and what's happening in lots of different areas, policymaking and regulatory environment. At what point is enough enough? There's always, we always end the year, the legislative session, with how many more new laws every year. And this session, of course, is going to be a little bit disjointed. But at what point is enough enough? And what are you looking forward to when the legislators come back, potentially in May, back to look at some new, what they need to wrap up for the year?
Well, I tend to be sort of a person, glass half full type person. And so one of the things that I have been pleased to see is the level of innovation that has come out in the last 8 weeks in terms of regulation. There was a great article in the Chicago Tribune not long ago about we flattened the curve, let's flatten the bureaucracy a little bit. And look what's happened in healthcare in just a short 8 weeks. We pulled back regulations for FDA testing to get drugs to market faster to combat this virus. We've lifted regulations to allow for more telemedicine, which has been a tremendous boom, not just for those of us that are under stay-at-home orders, but for rural communities and hopefully ongoing. And so I think it's, to your point, is enough enough? Yeah, I think it's time to take a step back and let's evaluate regulations perhaps that have outlived their time. And I think anything at this point that can spur innovation, really bolster different industries in new ways is something that we should all be looking at as we go back to the state capitol and jump on this road to recovery.
Mm-hmm. And I'll just throw this out to anybody, but I sort of sense there is potential for some new humility and collaboration in this space.
Let's hope.
And, that could be an interesting silver lining to your point, sentiment of how do we, this is so disruptive. This could lend itself to innovation and creativity like we haven't seen in a long time. And we'd be smart to make sure, people who are for less regulation are at the table, people who represent private industry. Senator, let's jump in with you. And I'd love for everybody to go around. What do you think is going to be the smart, and again, I think I'm using the word smart, but what do we need to be focused on for the next couple months in terms of the regulatory environment? I think family leave is still in play, public option might still be in play, graduated tax, new graduated income tax. What are your predictions in light of where we're at now with this economic devastation and where you think policymakers are going to take that? It's kind of a tough question, to see the future, but Senator?
But it is the policy question, and we're starting to hear bits of that conversation now. The state government, Colorado's budget's about $32 billion. We're looking at about a $3 billion hit in the early projections. May get worse than that, quite frankly. And so people who believe that government is the answer are going to immediately come back and say, well, we need a tax increase. We need to go get more money because government's the answer and we need to fund government. For those of us that think that the private sector, that free people, those who actually create wealth and create opportunity are the answer, more taxes is not the right answer. There's going to be a conversation that says, look, we clearly went through this situation where people had to stay at home. They needed to go home. Therefore, we need family medical leave so everybody can stay home whenever they need to stay home. My response to that would be, look, the economy is on its knees. We need to help businesses get back on their feet, not give them yet one more tax increase, one more burden, which family medical leave would be for many businesses. Many businesses, it would be a step down in the quality of care for their employees, but a regulatory burden foisted on them by the government. So we need to be really careful as we walk into this. I like to say in crisis, the word crisis in Mandarin is wijai. It's a 2-character word, dangerous opportunity. There's a lot of danger in this crisis we're in, but there's opportunity as well. And we need to make sure that the opportunity tilts toward freedom and the ability for people to make choices, because out of those creative choices, the freedom to make creative choices, we'll find new levels of productivity, new ways that different ideas can surface from entrepreneurial individuals, entrepreneurial companies, and quite frankly, entrepreneurs within the bureaucracy who think here's a better way of doing this. And we need to promote those sorts of thinkings as we work through this. Because there's going to be a knee-jerk response that says, look, we got to preserve government, and that means we're going to need more tax dollars to do it. I could not disagree more with that idea, which is being floated right now.
I can't think of, as I talk to business owners and corporate, folks in Colorado who are faced with the horrible aspect of downsizing staff and figuring out new budgets, resetting budgets for the year. I just can't imagine anybody would be open to a tax increase at this point. I just can't imagine in a state like Colorado, where we are very freedom loving, even across party lines, I just can't imagine the appetite for a tax increase. If
I completely agree, but when you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And people that believe government is the answer, they're going to be looking for a tax increase. So we got to be careful about that.
Oh, absolutely. And I think you're right. I don't think family leave is dead. I don't think the public option is dead. And it'll be interesting to see. Cinnamon, can you weigh in on those? I know those are both topics that you're very close to as well.
Sure. And I think that as we go into this legislative session and as we look towards recovery, let's hope, that really we need to be asking ourselves is, I'm hoping that our legislature asks, are these bills going to spur economic growth? Are they going to bolster Coloradans? Are they going to put people back to work? Are they going to grow our economy? And are they going to put us back to where we were in January in terms of a robust economy? And I think that should be just the lens that we look through for everything. I think foisting new programs and new regulations, new taxes onto the backs of small business and Coloradans in general is the wrong way to go right now.
Mm-hmm. And Lynn, you've already, you get tasked with new regulations on an annual basis. Give us your sense of where you think, in light of the COVID-19 crisis, where you think the oil and gas industry is going to be in a regulatory change in the next 6 months or so.
Oh boy, I don't know if I can tell you where we'll be. I'll tell you where I hope we are. And that is, where I've hoped we could get for a very long time. And in light of this crisis, I hope that we can get to a point where we can have reasonable, rational conversations around our industry and around our regulatory environment, which I feel has been sorely lacking for a very long time. There's all this talk about 100% renewable goals by tomorrow and, natural gas and oil going away completely, which is not a reasonable, rational conversation. We are an all of the above industry. We believe in everything, but that can't be a none of the below. So I really would just love to get to a point again where we can have reasonable conversations. We can get to a point where we have smart regulations are being put in place around our industry. Again, the do no harm concept, where we can continue to grow in the state of Colorado and continue to be the cornerstone of Colorado's economy, which we are today. And that's where I hope we get in the next 6 months. And I hope that regulatory bodies, again, really take a hard look at what is necessary to accomplish here in the next 6 months, and what are things that, we can take a look at, push down the road until things kind of settle out a little bit, and maybe what makes sense to not even tackle at this particular time.
Absolutely. I use the word, let's just, if we just table some of these things for let's get our economy back on track, focus on what's important, getting people back to work, and let's regroup on all these other things in a year. To me, that's even a win. Like, let's save that fight for another day and just focus on Coloradans and Colorado businesses. I'm going to give everybody a chance for closing comments. One of the things that we're focused on is sort of the term profits and purpose, and pushing back on the notion that profits are bad. It's a little bit counterculture nowadays, but we all understand that whether you're a for-profit business or a non-for-profit business, profit actually gives you the ability to keep your business going, to keep employees hired, to make capital expenditures, to plan for the future. And it's a good thing. And also talking about how business has a purpose, and that's a good thing too. The purpose could be, selling products, treating suppliers in a ethical manner, lots of purposes to business, and how we work to strengthen business actually affects so many people. So would love your thoughts on that concept of, if you have any thoughts on the profits and purpose concept that we're trying to push with Colorado Business Roundtable, or what your closing comments are on a regulatory environment. And I think too, I'm kind of making this a super long question, but I really like hearing, I think, optimism in all of your voices, and that I think that the private sector, and all of you have a really great private sector, innovative, optimistic viewpoint. I think it's going to come down to leaders like you to help be the problem solvers that get us through this tough time. So that was a whole bunch of jumbled questions, but we'd just love to open it up for your closing comments and as we kind of wrap it up. And Lynn, how about you start and we'll kind of go around the room.
Sure, I'd love to. So I'd like to focus on the purpose piece of what you just said, Debbie, and that's something that we've really been focused on, just amidst everything that's going on with our industry, is really trying to connect the dots for folks, bring it back to how natural gas and oil impact lives every day. I had an op-ed in Colorado Politics yesterday that kind of hit on that a little bit, and just the, hey, please, be cognizant that, in this time of work from home and shelter in place, when you're jumping on a video call, when you're jumping on a conference call on your phone. I know for me, when I'm putting my son on his iPad or the Xbox so I can get 20 minutes of work done right now, those are all products that are made in part or in whole by petroleum byproducts. When we're looking at the medical crisis right now that we're facing in our, healthcare heroes every day, the ventilators, almost any piece of modern medical equipment, hand sanitizer, the aspirin, all of those things are in part or in whole supported by or made by petroleum byproducts. And so I think that purpose piece is really a big one for us right now, because I really just want folks to understand how natural gas and oil impacts their lives every single day. And we should be celebrating that we have our energy independence for the first time, that we provide accessible, affordable energy for Americans every day, and celebrate those things. And of course, look for ways to improve every day, and we do, but we should be celebrating that instead of attacking that almost on a daily basis.
Thank you. Cinnamon, closing comments for us?
Sure. I'm going to focus a little bit on some of the optimism that you talked about. And I think that there are some things that we can point to that are going to help us along this road to recovery. And it's, in general, our spirit as Coloradans to come together and work closely. I think there was a great deal of partisanship in January. I think we would be remiss in not mentioning the vitriol coming out of both sides on every topic. And to boot, it's an election year. And so I am just grateful that in this state, at least, I think that we have really circled the wagons and are supporting our healthcare heroes. I appreciate Governor Polis's efforts to put together an innovation team to look at ways to bring the economy back online. And I think all of us working together, hopefully, is a spirit that we can kind of capture as we move forward, even though we're going back into a contentious legislative session, potentially, and certainly an election year. I think in terms of regulation, we've also been forced to look at some things in our economy that weren't working perhaps. And again, I'll go back to that telemedicine example. I think we are all coming out of this with a better understanding of our healthcare system and the heroes that work there every day, whether to echo some of Lynn's thoughts, really focusing on their purpose over profits, or these are men and women that are putting their lives on the line, that are innovators that are finding new cures, new drugs, new treatments, and really working to make sure that we are all safe and can come through this in a positive fashion. So I think those sort of positive aspects are ones that will take us back to where we want to be and pull us out of this, demise that we're in right now. So hopefully the future is bright. I think it's a little bit of a ways away, but there are some lessons that we've learned here that I hope we can employ as we move forward.
Thank you. And Senator, you're the man in the arena. So tell us what you think as kind of final comments.
Yeah, exactly. Living in the arena, sometimes you get bloodied and bruised, but that's the honor and joy of the project. I just want to pause and say, Debbie, I appreciate so much the opportunity to be on this call with Lynn and Cinnamon. Really have appreciated the perspectives I've heard. Let me answer your questions in reverse order. The profits are purpose question. I love that. The reality is I'm an entrepreneur, 10 companies over the last 30 years. And with every company, would help my team understand, and I had one in particular that was a chain of learning centers, and these people came out of public education, most of them, and the idea of profit to them at first was uncomfortable. Profits, who wants profits? And they began to understand that it's actually sustainability. We provide a great service that helps students, that helps children have a better life. And in order to do that, we have to be sustainable. And in order to be sustainable, to achieve our purpose, we make profits. And so profits are purpose, and there's sustainability, which gives you the ability to do that which you're seeking to do, which I hope is make society a better place to live. So I think profits are purpose is a great way to look at it. To the other question, this question we've been talking about today, this regulatory question, there is, I think, an enormous silver lining in this COVID-19 crisis in which we find ourselves. Yesterday, I'm looking at it here, Atlantic Monthly kicked out a story that said unlicensed haircutters are only the beginning. And the subheadline is, amid a pandemic, states are cutting back the red tape that kept healthcare workers out. So in this crisis, we're discovering sometimes the burdens, the regulations that government thought were the great answers, maybe aren't such great answers. And we're pulling back on some of those regulations in the crisis. And we need to evaluate carefully. Should we put those regulations back in place? Or maybe have those regulations outlived their usefulness, and we should let those regulations fall by the wayside so that state-to-state interaction can be more seamless and have less friction, and so that activities within the state, in fact, rise up to achieve their purpose through private ideas, private individual ideas, and private businesses with the help as opposed to the restraint of government. So I'm hopeful that we'll learn a lot of lessons through this COVID-19 crisis, and lessening the regulatory burden could very well be one of the lessons that we learn. So Debbie, thanks for the opportunity to sit with you folks and speak about these issues today.
Well, thank you, Senator Lundeen and Lynn Granger and Cinnamon Watson for being with us today. And this has been a virtual roundtable brought to you by Colorado Business Roundtable. And we're doing a whole series of virtual roundtables based on our policy priorities. And I am just thrilled that you guys brought some optimism and some problem solving to this really unprecedented time in our economic history. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.